Hey, what's up? My name is Andy. I am a master cyclist and a cycling coach. And today I'm here to tell you why using CTL is no good. You should stop doing it and instead measure your training load with hours or kilojoules. Product placement. So here's the problem with CTL. Too many athletes chase CTL as a metric that they're pinning their fitness to. And when you're chasing a metric rather than focusing on the purpose of training itself, you're not on the right path. I believe the purpose of training is to develop a gradual, sustainable, incremental training stimulus that leads directly to increased performance. And when you're chasing numbers like CTL or FTP, those numbers themselves become the goal and they get in the way of progress. So here's the problem with CTL directly. It is an exponentially weighted moving average with a time constant of 42. Why 42? Because the authors thought that roughly represented like the time constant of aerobic adaptations, like on a global population, which is a huge red flag because despite being a member of a global population, you are not the entire population. You are an individual and you need individualized prescriptions. So what is it an exponentially weighted moving average of? Well, TSS. What is TSS? TSS is calculated on an activity by activity basis, and it is calculated as normalized power squared divided by threshold power times duration. Well, what's normalized power? This is a good one. It's a 30-second rolling average of power raised to the fourth power, which is then averaged again, and you take the fourth root of that. Why? Why all of that complication? Well, the authors intended for that to simplify and smooth out the effort, the stochastic nature of cycling into a single number to represent, how difficult an activity was. That number is complete bonkers. It's just nuts. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why the fourth power and not the fifth power? Why a 30-second average and not a 45-second average? The answer is, to the authors, this roughly approximated what they saw in a global population. Again, which is not going to benefit you, an individual. So, Andy, surely you can't have a problem with FTP. Like, that's the one number in there that has worth. It's the only way to measure your self-worth as an athlete, right, is your FTP. Like, no, FTP sucks too. The biggest problem with it, well, no, not the biggest. The first problem with it is measuring it. If you have an athlete do a ramp test, an 8-minute test, 20-minute test, an hour-long time trial, depending on how glycolytically dominant that athlete is, they're gonna have wildly different results, all at the same training state. Like, nothing metabolically or physiologically has changed, but just the influence of the testing protocol itself is influencing the results, and that's not okay. The other big problem with FTP is that if you're generically prescribing your training zones as a percentage, you're completely ignoring the individual metabolic response to how you generate power. To give a concrete example of this one, like, let's say you've got two athletes with matching 300-watt FTPs, and you prescribe each of them to go out and do a 2-hour endurance ride at 60% of FTP. All right, now the model says each athlete goes out, they ride at 180 watts, 2 hours, each guy gets 72 TSS, it affects their ATL exactly the same, it affects their fitness exactly the same, they should have the same fatigue. All is good. The model works. Praise the model! No, it doesn't work that way. If one of those athletes is glycolytically dominant, their true metabolic threshold is probably a lot closer to like 240 watts. And that means that them riding at 180 watts of a 240 watt threshold is absolutely going to incur a lot more fatigue than the aerobically dominant athlete. And the model completely ignores this extremely important and really foundational aspect of how we train. So let's go back and look at how CTL is calculated. We've got a 42-day time constant, which works at a global scale, strike one. We've got FTP, strike two. We've got normalized power, which, strikes 3, 4, 5, and 6. The only thing we're left with in there that makes any kind of sense and is tied to reality is duration. Why not use duration to measure your training load? Now, you might argue, well, that completely ignores the intensity, and that's one of the two most important aspects of your training. Yeah, fair enough. But if you're doing similar enough training week over week, and that wildly varying VO2 max week, an endurance week, sweet spot week, maybe a sprint week, those numbers are all gonna average out. And if you are really interested in tracking kind of the overall workload, look at kilojoules too. Like, that's not gonna vary wildly from week to week. If you're following the type of training I believe in, which is sustainable, gradual, incremental, you can use those as guardrails to make sure you're on the right track. And then listen to your body. Your body will tell you when you're fatigued. Your body will tell you when you need a rest. Like, how's your mood? Are you irritable? Are you waking up tired or hungry? Like, is your training motivation low? Each of those are far better indicators of fatigue than training stress balance will ever be. So, stop using CTL, start using duration and kilojoules. And give a quick shout out here to max power athlete Brian Caldwell. Brian just did his first USAC race this weekend, made the podium, finished second. Super proud of Brian. He's been putting in a ton of really high quality, purposeful work, and it's been an honor to see the progress that he's made. So if you'd like to be a max power athlete too, reach out to me on my website, maxpower.coach. I'm doing inquiries and consultations. Probably have room to bring on one more athlete this year. So if you're interested, hit me up. And thanks for listening to me rant. It's been fun. See ya.